Hi, everybody on Zoom. Hi, everybody here. Thank you so much for coming. Turn this on first before I start talking. Thank you for joining us. This is the season finale. Every time we start the season, I think, man, June feels like it's so far away, and then it's here, and I'm like, wow, the season is over. I can't believe it. I am so grateful. I want to say to Josh, to pass on to Jess, that we are so grateful for Type this year, for giving us our first season back to in-person and making it so spectacular. So thank you, and please pass on our thanks to Jess. Kaylee, up there doing their thing, is always the absolute best. I couldn't do it without her. She's my calm, as well as my intelligence, I guess. And a big thanks to all of the publicists at Flying Books and House of Anansi for giving me books and giving us books for the raffle. There is a raffle. We have 3 bundles of books to raffle off, so if you want some tickets, you can get some. And thank you to Martha and Spencer for coming. I practiced it as Tomas.
It's both.
For the whole thing. And then when I heard you introduce yourself as Thomas, I was like, Lord. Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. It's great. I'm excited. So Junction Reads exists in Toronto. Welcome to everybody who's joining us from anywhere around Turtle Island or further. Junction Reads exists in Toronto, which for thousands of years has been the traditional land of the Wendat, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Anishinaabe, including the Chippewas and Mississaugas of the Credit. It is still home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work in the community on their territory. Before I introduce Martha to come up and read, I will say that the Zoom cannot be heard without the microphone, so just for you guys to be conscious of that. Martha Bátiz, born and raised in Mexico City, Martha now lives in Toronto, where she teaches Spanish language and literature at York University and creative writing in Spanish, a course that she founded and created at the University of Toronto School of Continuing Studies. Martha is an award-winning writer and translator, the author of 4 books, including the story collection Plaza Requiem, winner of an International Latino Book Award, and the novella The Wolf's Mouth, winner of the Casa de Teatro Prize. Her articles, chronicles, reviews, and short stories have appeared in diverse newspapers and magazines in Mexico, Spain, Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, Costa Rica, Peru, Ireland, England, the United States, and Canada. No Stars in the Sky is her powerful and undownable collection of short stories from House of Anansi. Martha, welcome.
Sorry, that's Mexicans, we are short. Well, I have to start by thanking you so much, Alison, Kaylee, and everyone involved in organizing this reading series. It's an honor for me to be here, and I'm thrilled and a bit nervous, so if I stumble when I'm reading, please forgive me. I am going to read an excerpt of one of the stories in this book that I'm so proud of. It's my second short story collection written entirely in English. English is my second language, and I've been living in Canada for 20 years, and it was always my dream to be able to build a career for myself here. And I knew that in order to do that, I had to face my fear of writing in a language that was not my own, and face my shortcomings and my limitations and overcome them. So I still struggle, and it takes me a long time to write anything because I am always, going back to the dictionary, making sure I've picked the right word. But I'm very thankful for everyone at Anansi, because they were very patient with me, very helpful, and without them, this book wouldn't exist. So thanks to House of Anansi and Doug Richland and everyone there as well. And thanks for everyone here for coming on a Sunday in a beautiful Sunday summer afternoon. You're here with us, it means a lot. I'm gonna start reading now, thanks. So this story is called Svetlana of Montreal. Nothing is crueler than hope. Svetlana holds her teacup in one hand and the little saucer in the other. The indigo blue china matches her eyes, a sharp contrast to her milk-white hair, a white that reminds me of my bridal dress, which once symbolized my own hopes, but is now a specter haunting my closet. Nothing is crueler. Svetlana's delicacy, her restraint, is discordant with the present. It's January 4th, 1998, and we are being treated to what meteorologists are already calling the worst snowstorm in 100 years. 100 years, 100 winters, an entire century has never seen a day as dreadful and dangerous as today. So here we are, Svetlana and I, in her small apartment in the plateau, chatting over tea. 100 years out of which she's been alive for how many? 80 something for sure, and at least the last 50 in Montreal. No one in my family has made it to 80, not even a distant relative, no one. Svetlana is sitting in her armchair, her deep blue eyes fixed on mine. Had I not come to know her as well as I do, the smile on her face would trick me into believing the tale she's about to tell is a happy one. I don't dare ask her if in Kiev, where she was raised after her family left Moscow, she ever experienced a storm like this. I don't dare ask because I'm aware that being in this comfortable room during a storm is very different than being in a city occupied by a brutal enemy army and later by an equally brutal regime. Life must have been hard even on sunny days, but Svetlana doesn't like to talk about it. She hardly mentions it, hardly complains, even about Ivan's death. We barely talk about it now, even though I know we both have trouble falling asleep at night, even though sometimes I'd like to talk about him nonstop, cry nonstop, scream nonstop. Svetlana won't open the door to my pain, so I've learned to live with it festering inside me like a dead fetus my body isn't ready to part with. Occasionally, one of us will say something like, Ivan would have loved these strawberries, or Ivan would be furious if he heard that news. Then we nod and fall silent and change the subject to something empty and meaningless, like Pierre's cafe was full of tourists today. Anything to yank us away from the moment. Anything to help us forget that Ivan is no longer here, that it will be a year in March, a year that will feel like 365 storms. But today, oddly enough, we are at peace. I was 6 years old, Svetlana says, taking a sip of her tea. 6, and I still remember every detail. I was in charge of cleaning his boots. Svetlana, go to the shed and scrub your father's boots clean, yelled my mother, and I immediately did as I was told. I scrubbed them with the same brush we used for the horses, and I had to scrub really hard because they were big for my hands and the leather was drunk with blood. The large dark stains had already begun to dry. Why would you wear boots in the middle of the summer? I wanted to ask, but I knew better and kept my mouth shut. Back then, people said that children were to be seen and not heard. I was barefoot. I liked the feeling of the grass tickling my feet, the warmth of the sun. It was July. July in Russia. I tried to picture it but failed. Ivan and I were supposed to go together. We were going to explore Svetlana's homeland side by side. Like Chekhov's characters, we dreamed of going to Moscow, but more than that, we longed to visit Kiev and look at the Dasha where Svetlana used to spend her summers. Ivan had fond memories of the chalet close to Mont Tremblant she used to rent when he was younger, and he wanted to see for himself the lakes and landscapes that were trapped forever in his grandmother's black and white childhood photographs. It doesn't take a huge effort to see how much of the spirited girl still inhabits this old lady. Her eyes have a soul of their own. Mother was packing when I came running into the house, she continues. It's not like we have much, of course, not like people nowadays, like children nowadays. Montreal wasn't the city you see now either, when I arrived. There were not as many shops and restaurants. People went to church on Sundays, so I did too. I wanted to belong, and I got used to everything. except the accumulation of possessions that is the modern world's sickness. I'm about to comment on the stacks of books spilling out of her bookcases when, as if she had read my mind, she adds, books don't count. They are not mere objects. They are lives, worlds. Thank you.
Thank you so much. When I tell you guys this is a beautiful collection, I sort of feel like no one's going to believe me anymore with my critical reviews of books, because I really, really do find something to love about everything. But most people, if you've been here before, know that I'm partial to short stories. This collection is incredible, and I urge you to buy it. Spencer Gordon, thank you for coming again. Spencer is the author of several poetry chapbooks, Anno Zombie Dance, Conservative Majority, and Feel Good, Look Great, Have a Blast, which was shortlisted. That was hidden in your website. Which was shortlisted for the 2012 BP Nickel Chapbook Award. His writing has also appeared in the Globe and Mail, This Magazine, the Winnipeg Review, CNQ, Joyland, and many other periodicals and anthologies, including Best Canadian Sports Writing from ECW Press. He has been selected as one of CBC Books Writers to Watch, and was the winner of a CBC Book Award. He is co-founder and was senior editor of The Puritan, now The Ex-Puritan, one of Canada's best literary magazines. He holds an MA in creative writing from the University of Toronto and a BA in English and philosophy from the University of Ottawa. And he has taught book writing, both professional and creative, in various programs. He is the author of 3 books: the poetry collection Cruise Missile Liberals, the short story collection Cosmo, which was the winner, and his moving collection of poetic monologues, The Horse in the Window, from House of Anansi Press. Spencer, welcome.
Yeah, thank you for that excavation. Thank you for having me in Junction Reads. I don't think I've ever read a Junction Reads, but I was living in the Junction when you started Junction Reads.
At 3030.
3030. And then I think it happened at some point. Was it at Access ever?
It was at Access in the basement, yeah.
Yeah, the stinky
A few,
basement at
yeah.
Access. If you've been to the basement at Access, it's distinctive, which you wrote to love. I love Access. So anyway, yeah, thanks a lot. It's great to be back, actually. So yeah, this is my 3rd book. It's called The Horse at the Window from House of Anansi. It's kind of a funny fit for a prose reading series, because I had actually submitted this manuscript in my brain as a collection of prose poems. There's like another poetry manuscript. But my editor there was like, how do you feel about it being fiction, under the fiction kind of imprint? So, you could call it a junk if you want, it's fine. Yeah, it just came out, and actually the launch for the book, the official launch, is this Thursday. So if you're nearby the Anansi bookshop on Thursday from 7 to 9, we'll be launching this with author Passion will be there, and also a fundraiser for Fred Victor, which is a social services charity in Toronto that assists people experiencing homelessness. Yeah. So also, there's a lot of weird stuff in here, considering that it was really a book of poetry, but then can maybe fit as fiction as well. So I like to try to adapt the reading to wherever I'm at. So I'm gonna read 2 pieces that are fairly prosaic and not kind of like batshit as well. It's Junction Reads, right? So I'm gonna read this one. It's called Aperture 2, just because there's an earlier piece called Aperture. Every now and then I see the fern shaking and see the fern shaking. Eyes generally grew accidentally as we flung off our single-celled histories. Yet the transcendental experience often involves another way of seeing. Veils are stripped. scales fall away. Luckily, both Saul and Mr. Potato Head have their pupils and irises and long buxom lashes and explore a range of luminous flux. Everything is exactly as it is, but you are not. How wonderful to pierce the dark by simply blinking. The fern shaking. The round white butterfly, a thaumatrope on the deck. Gilmore Avenue blowing summer. The horse galloping on the roll of film is not galloping. It is a series of photographs of a horse. Your eye on the zoetrope of the fern. Nothing moving. Nothing can move. And yet I thought in the ecstasy of my conversion, tears soaking my $4 t-shirt of a soap bubble. I would never know the edge of the veil. I was trapped wonderfully inside this bubble, a turbaned boy at the bottom of the Arabian, a Jane's plaything. My eyes could see only what they could see, up to the limits of vision, so nothing could harm me. I cried because I was safe finally. I was the warm cabin in the mountains, ringed by the baying waves. I was the steel cage in the ocean, sharks of the mind inhaling chum just outside the box. I did not have to be a good boy. No more, you fakes, you maniacs. I could sit down here, anywhere in the boat, and let my projects drop all at once, like scales falling from tiny paper huts. There is another way, a clearer way, to see the fern shaking, and it is to see the fern as a product and blessing of your vision, which occurs for you only. The limits of vision are themselves a clever way to signal that there is no fern outside you, or there it is, shaking, ultimately still, within the boundaries of your eye. That there are boundaries should in turn signal that you are everything that is. What else could be outside the boundaries? Nothing, an impossibility to experience, and yet all our problems impale us from the imagining outside. Hailing like incorrigible wrestling heels from parts unknown, tearing through the curtain and into the light. Where were you before you were born? Ghost story. Where were you after you died? A haunting. The gnashing jaws of others forming their terrible opinions. We have always been in the room. We never left. When Venus pierces the veil of night, she shines as an afterimage, a revolving wheel. Yet this eye is not a camera, and yet you alone are. You alone. And yet you are not a cynic, and not a narcissist, and not a solipsist. You are the world's one and only honored thing, and thus the world. The fern does not shake, and yet the tears slip from your eyes and onto your cheeks and into your cheek cotton. Other people come up the trail and cross your borders. They wave to you, bring you great comfort in your solitude. Bowls of rice, pails of water, grass sandals, the occasional letter from someone far away. They slip between the soapy veil of the very edge of what you can see. Suddenly, they're inside you, holding you, rocking you, teaching you, arousing in you a pity so wide and so deep it's enough to keep looking for an eye, long after your sockets are over water, and you are wandering on again, groping for light. That's that one. And I will read one more, shorter, closing one. Thanks, Martha Thomas, for reading this one. This one is called The Gateless Gate. They say it will be quick. They say it will be like catching a glimpse of a white horse galloping by your window, just as still and just as bright. Or like catching a shooting star above you in cold space, a star or a satellite at the International Space Station, or a twinkling rhomboid of rock while you crane your neck to look. It will be your mother's silhouette, not 1 week dead, in the kitchen archway at 2:24 a.m., right before you throw on the oven, go back to blubbering into sorbet. Someone's lucky hand in poker flashed in drunken jest, and then a blurry afterimage. A few numbers, reds and blacks, the face of a queen or a jack. they say will be like all of these things. It will be the tip of the tongue, the top of the mind, a deja vu, a quick goodbye. Like a man hurtling past your office window from 30 floors up. A billow of cream-colored coat, lights bent like in the tarot, and a blue September sky installed behind. Before you didn't notice a door. Up in the attic of nails, drywall, studs, and sour wallpaper, there were nearly 4 walls, cobbling a room you'd come to know as yourself. Then it opened, and you remembered the dream from last night. You saw the fish surfacing and swallowing the silver. You saw the sun dart and dip to earth as if to kiss or drink. Before, you didn't even know there was a door. So when it closes again, just as quickly, it crushes your heart. I was born a green acorn. My destiny, my job, is to become a scarlet oak. Born a wispy seed, I'll push through sticky, clumpy earth to unfurl my wings. I was born a black mote to burst forth a tad. I'll grow muscular legs, become a frog, and sit very still, sucking flies in the murky bog. Born a golden retriever, I'll run and bark and sleep in the sun until my comes. Born a horse, I'll fall for my mother, but soon begin to trot. Born a man, my tongue turns to iron, my bones to dust. Unpacking boxes, opening cuts, rehearsing injuries in a dry, dusty hat, I spot the seam and groove and hinges of the door. I see the door open for the length of time to take something bright to race past my window. Was that a white horse? Was it something as impossible as magical? What is the one thing that nothing, no one, not one thing has or can hold but me? With the baby robin, I cheat for my destiny. Sweating, finding sleep, waking, nodding off, rousing myself, slapping my cheeks, pacing, flopping down, drinking water, falling asleep again, unable to lift my chin, the radio static, the distorted waltz from rooms below me, heavy as lead, vinyl pop, falling asleep again. Hilarious what the day devours. Hilarious to know halfway through that a year is something that eats. Finding a lack of choice in birth and subsisting. Letting things happen. Letting chips fall where they may. All with a hilarious smile on their face. Months devour weeks. Years show themselves insatiable for the small, infinitely divisible things they contain. What's another nap in the warm attic? A slow clomp up the stairs to bed in the afternoon. It's another walk to the drugstore. It's another day spent hunting a password in an Excel file saved in a shared drive folder. A series of minute ethical decisions like, did you feel bad for the red smear of rabbit on the highway? Did you respond with joy to your enemy's ascension? At the very end of the world, the very last night on earth, we go to bed. I mean to squeeze your handle. I mean to stay up, alert. But look at us. We've fallen asleep. Instead of holding or whispering through the crickets and sirens of this last summer night, you turn away, soon uncomfortable from the heat, and you sleep on your back, and I sleep on my neck, the way I did as a child, cheek against a cool pillow. There's a 25-minute episode of The Simpsons, flashing pink and blue and yellow over our dreaming heads, beamed from the light of the laptop. At one point in the night, still asleep, I sit up. I point toward the wall where, for a moment, there is a door. Thank you very much.
The batshit is the best part of the book, but there's also tremendous grief, probably the most beautiful violence I've experienced in a book. So yeah,
Thank
I
you.
highly recommend it. And poetic, I mean beautifully poetic. A dream. This is why I was saying Tomas. Born in Argentina and raised in Toronto, Tomas Hachard is an author and public servant, currently a policy advisor. He's one of those uber talented writers who seems as comfortable writing government policy as he is gorgeous prose. Tomas's work has been published in The Atlantic, The Guardian, The Globe and Mail, Slate, NPR, Guernica Magazine, the LA Review of Books, and Hazlitt, among many others. Recently also listed as a writer to watch by the CBC. His debut novel, A City in Flames, a beautiful love story, a troubling and timely novel, was published by Fine Books. Tomas, welcome.
My family who's on Zoom will like that you call me Tomas. All right. Thank you, Alton. Thank you, Junction Reads. Thank you, Ty, for having us here. And I was happy to discover this reading series like this season. So yeah, it's fantastic to have us as part of the neighborhood. I didn't move too far away. So I'd love to get to be here and participate as well. I have to make notes because otherwise I forget everything. So City in Flames is about a lot of things. I've never really grown comfortable describing what the book's about, which is my publisher probably hates that. But it's, on the one hand, it's a love story. It's about two people, Kevin and Sarah, who meet online. They are each living their own lonely existence. Sarah is finishing grad school in London. Kevin works in IT in a fictional city called Hillside, and they meet online and start a relationship. At the same time, the book is about this city, Hillside, which is in, like I say, fictional city. It's in an unnamed country that is like Canada. And it's a country that elects a populist leader called Guy. And that's over the course of a year or so or more, but undergoes a sort of social and political breakdown. And the book kind of goes back and forth between Sarah and Kevin and their relationship unfolding and how they come to sort of fall in love and how the relationship grows. And Kevin's life in Hillside after this political breakdown that becomes a sort of dystopian reality where the hillside empties out and Kevin is sort of having to survive. And so it's really kind of about, in that sense, it's about love, it's about politics, about catastrophe, it's about living in catastrophe in different ways. And it's about how, one relationship grows as a society kind of deteriorates. So I always have trouble because I can either read like the nice love story parts or I can read like the depressing dystopian parts. But I'm going to read the depressing dystopian part. And talk about the love story part. So this is toward the beginning. And like I say, Kevin, there's been this night of the fires. Hillside has kind of undergone a tremendous violence. And Kevin has hidden in a park after his building crumbles to the ground and has spent the night hiding in a park. Kevin was up through the night, watching the flash of the fires and hearing the slapping of shoes off the pavement. When morning came, new buildings were burning and smoke was still gushing from the city onto the lake. Kevin crawled out from his hiding spot and nearly hit a man rushing through the park with a young girl in his arms. Moving into the city, he tried to block out everything but the air moving through his lungs and the blood still pulsing in his veins. People emerged from the smoke and ash with weary faces. The violence was either marked on their bodies or it shone in their eyes. This is what it looked like when P's words lost their force. In the thick of the chaos downtown, Kevin kept his head down and tried not to catch anyone's attention. He held his phone tight in his hand. Up the street, the last pieces of the building came crashing down. Kevin rushed in the other direction to avoid the debris. Clouds of cement dust settled on his cheeks and in his hair. He tried to turn away, but the haze surrounded him. Around the corner, a crowd had gathered at the entrance to a building. At the back, a man was standing on his toes, trying to see to the front. Kevin stepped behind him and careened forward with the group as it funneled through the front doors. The building was a community center. He recognized the sign now. Inside, a hand touched his elbow and led him into a gym. When the hand let go, Kevin crashed onto the cot in front of him. He heard the woman who had guided him ask something, but didn't have the energy to glean what she wanted. He lay with his face down until he heard her walk away. He pressed his head through the hollow pillow and thin mattress until he felt the cot's cold frame. Kevin had survived the fires, found the center, secured a bed. Now he figured his luck would run out. He didn't trust that he could live through new horrors. The gym was wall to wall with people, luggage, empty food containers, and garbage bags. Its air was dense with hundreds of overlapping conversations and thousands of silent worries. Kevin recoiled from the noise and disorder. He could still feel the shaking of his apartment. He could picture his computer melting into the building's foundations. Turning to the wall next to his bed, he closed his eyes and folded the pillow to cover his ears. He tried to squeeze the world down to size, down into something he could stand to think about. By the next night, Kevin still hadn't moved from the cot. The city was without power, and the center was lit only by the occasional flashlight as people struggled for a few hours of sleep. In the dim glow of the gym, Kevin lay on his back and held his arms in the air until they trembled and his fingers grew numb. He turned toward the wall and lit up his phone. Sarah's texts were refusing to load anymore. Kevin's whole conversation with her, a record of the year together, was achingly absent on the screen. All he had left was her voice message, which he had downloaded onto his phone and could recite to memory. Sarah had been nervous, a few drinks in perhaps. When she finally started talking, she spoke in rambling sentences. She asked about Kevin's apartment. Buildings are coming down, she said. God, tell me yours isn't one of them. Is there somewhere you can hide? You didn't need to go to the protest. You didn't need to go. Fuck, what am I saying? Why am I the one freaking out? This is going to be okay. This is going to be okay. And then, out of nowhere, the laugh. Sarah tried to draw it back at first, gulping down the sound and air. A second later, though, she let it out in full, like a valve blowing steam. It was that moment that almost made Kevin cry. He would rewind the message to hear it again and again, because Kevin understood it. Sarah was scared and embarrassed about how scared she was. Her laugh meant she knew he would understand. After that came a long pause, then a quiet sound that slowly grew, a whimper and a sniffle, before Sarah softly said, I miss you, and hung up with him. Kevin had transcribed Sarah's message onto a scrap of paper in anticipation of the inevitable moment when his phone would run out of battery. All day he'd lain still and quiet, his phone in one hand and Sarah's message in the other, refusing offers of food and drink and planning the only things that seemed worth planning. His first text to Sarah when service came back, the next to his mom. Now he pictured both of them with their phones in their hands, waiting to hear from him. When the resulting grief became unbearable, he turned to listen to a group nearby as they spoke in hushed tones about where they came from, where they worked, sketches of lives before the fires. The words seemed to carry in the dark, detached from the speakers, maybe even from reality. A few cots away, a father talked to his sleepless son, trying to pull him out of the unimaginable present. Where would we go? What would we do if we were back home? If we could leave this place? If. The boy was looking down at his feet and hands, but the dad pulled his face up with his eyes. You can do this, he seemed to say, for the two of us. The movies, maybe? The kid mumbled. The father lit up. We would go to the movies, he asked back, completing the thought. What would we see? The boy shrugged. He stayed quiet. Maybe Frozen, the dad asked. Yeah, the boy said. Or the Little Mermaid, the dad pushed. You liked that when we watched it, remember? The boy nodded, and the dad looked at his own hand, which had been on the boy's shoulder the whole time. He dropped it. The boy turned back to his cot and lay down facing the wall. Where would we go? What would we do? Sarah's voice, the dad's head in his hands. Kevin knew he had been dreaming. A snore cracked the hum of muted conversations and heavy breathing in the sun. Kevin turned onto his back again and lifted his arms. Next to him, a notice on the wall advertised weekly yoga classes on Wednesday nights. Kevin tried to imagine what it would be like for his bones to stop aching with anxiety, for his muscles not to tighten each time the center's doors opened and let loose a burst of sound, reminding him that these walls were not the start of the new world, but only a thin boundary protecting him from the old one. A family a few cots from Kevin had pushed their beds into a square formation and turned the middle into a playpen. A dozen kids from around the center were curled up, sleeping on piles of pillows and blankets. The parents whispered to each other, running for the dozenth time through the same next steps, waiting for the world to be open to their plans. Kevin put his phone to his ear and listened to Sarah's message one more time. The soft murmurs of the center gave way to her voice, and Kevin traveled back to the previous spring. He thought of the glitch in the system that had brought Sarah to him in the first place, a glitch that had been corrected now, forcefully, and with no chance of adjustment. He remembered his first conversation with Sarah, the way he had opened to her from the start, the feeling of waking up to her words every morning. He reached back, trying to wrap his arms around the last year, and then, with Sarah's laugh still echoing in his ears, he fell asleep for the fourth time that day.
Gonna do a couple of raffles. Thank you. If you haven't bought any raffle tickets,
Yeah, and you want to run back? Kaylee has them.
good idea though. That's a good idea. Sometimes vote for one. I mean, you know, I have psychic abilities.
Thank you so much, Martha, Spencer, Tomas, beautiful. And the love story in A City in Flames is brilliant. Told in text messages. Can't beat it.
Okay, so first I'm going to raffle off.
Michael Marola gave us a bunch of copies of his book. So there's one of those in there. Brian Penhusen's book is in there. And a friend of mine wrote Hunting a Sea Glass Heart, hilarious. A friend of Marianne's and mine about a menopausal pirate. And it's honestly hysterical. So if you win this, you're lucky. Andres. Sure. There. Can I give it to you? There you go. Again, two of Michael's books, his collection of short stories and the collection agency files was so good. And then a very good friend of mine, Farzana Doctor, wrote 52 Weeks to Happiness. It is a resource for artists, for caregivers, for therapists, for anybody who wants to be a little more conscious with how you're living and day to day, week to week. So there you go. Kevin Wilson. Okay, so I'm gonna do I have our June books, which includes Spencer's, Martha's, Tomas's, and Lydia Qua's books. I'll do that at the end. But if you guys want to join for the Q&A, would be great. We stopped doing the break. Anyone notice that?
Yeah. Or would you like it? Anyway.
Just tell jokes. Huh?
Dad jokes.
Thank you. So it's funny when we sat down to have our curatorial meeting for next year, we were very conscious of putting things together and authors together thematically and lengthwise and all that kind of stuff. And we didn't really do that this year because we just had so many names that I just had to fit people in where people could get fit in. But thematically, we've got some stuff connecting you guys. Martha, in the story, Uncle Co's 1,000 Lives, The narrator, who is transcribing her uncle's poems, says, "It was through these poems that I understood the depth of simplicity." And I want to ask about this. Martha, your writing in this collection is direct and forthright, but manages still to pull the reader into deep emotions. Each of you conveys the deepest emotions in simplest ways. Tomas in the emotional power that can be conveyed in a single text message, and Spencer in a 3.5-page monologue about the death of your dog. I actually had to text Kaylee after I read it. It was powerful. So the question I have as writers, how do you make poetry out of the simple moments? And conversely, how do you translate something emotionally complex and as incomprehensible as grief into mere words?
If I knew that, I would probably be a much faster writer. I'm just trying to think where to start. So I don't know I'm not going to answer your question directly at first. I do have to say that the emotion was something that was quite central to how I was picturing this book. There's a lot that is about sort of politics in this book, but it's explicitly, in a sense, not a book about politics. It's a book about how people emotionally react to politics, whether they realize it or not. It's sort of how it affects us, and then therefore affects the way that we are sort of living with other people. And so I think one of the challenges that exists is that you want to be, and that sort of, I think took me a while to get to what you're doing with the text messages, which was a way to try to then have a conversation at a distance, but it also became a way for there to be this emotional connection that's also distant. And so they are at once having this ability to connect, but they're also very much sort of able to construct their emotional realities in that, because they're not face to face, right? And so I think that for me became a way to try to have it to convey the emotions in a way without it having to be too much about explaining what they are, which I think is probably a piece of it. I don't know, maybe I'll just leave it at that for now, because I'm sure things are too.
Thank you, Tomas, for going first, so I could translate my thoughts into English and then talk. For me, emotion in my writing is paramount. It's the backbone, really, of everything I do, and that is because many years, almost as many years ago as pounds ago, I was an actress. And as I was working in, soap operas and things in Mexico, one of the things I learned in acting school was that when you enter the stage as a character, you never leave the stage with the same emotion in your gut. It has to change. And so for me, when I am writing and I sit down and write, I have a certain already, emotion in my body and and it's really in my body, like I really do it. This is very physical for me. And then when I'm done writing, it has to be different. And it's the same for the characters in the stories as well. So it is an emotional roller coaster, and it's exhausting sometimes, but it's the only way I know how to create. I do it very theatrically that way. And so I connect at a visceral level with the characters. So in that sense, what I really focus is on the experience that the reader is going to have, so that also when the reader takes any of my little humble stories, they may have a certain emotion going about in their day. And when they finish reading the story, I want for that emotion to have taken a Simone Biles kind of, on the floor trip. And so that's what I try to do emotionally. Now, linguistically, because of my struggles with language, I wish I could do something more complex also that way. But I'm slowly, I keep trying, right? So that's it. Thank you.
Good question. Yeah, I like early days writing. Maybe not like super early, but like into writing books. I thought like maybe I wasn't a very emotional writer. And then like I had like when my first book came out, one reviewer said great review, but he said that it was reserved emotionally. And just that little line like kind of stuck with me for a few years, and I was like, is it reserved? And it really made me think about it. And then later with my second book, my friend Liz, after a few drinks, I think, she was like, Spencer, you have to go full God in your work. And again, I was like, I don't really know what that means either. So like both of these things clumped around me. And then I realized like I wasn't actually reserved, but I was just like familiar with certain emotions that I thought were like okay or permissible, like revulsion, fury, disgust, humor. I was like, oh yeah, I'm actually dealing with emotions. But when we talk about emotions, a lot of the time we talk about the things that are harder to deal with, like grief, sadness. I was like, those are the things that can, yeah, and it really clicked. So for me, it's a matter of time. And if I sit to intentionally produce something that contains that kind of gravity, it's almost doomed to fail. So I have to work around it and have to be extraordinarily patient with those. And even then, it's like, it's pretty dicey. It's probably not going to work. But then again, you know, like you can get surprised by something that you never thought was going to contain that kind of feeling. Well, the longer you sit with it, let it breathe, play. But that's a really, really hard question to answer. A good question.
You also wrote, and I present an example for all of the stuff, but you also wrote a dramatic monologue about your life in the 2000s, which was literally just,
you know, in 2003 I did this, in 2008 I did, and it was still, unless you were born in 2001, an emotional experience for a reader, right? Or a reader of a certain age. I guess if you're born in 1997, it also probably doesn't work. But
That story is based, I gotta give credit. That story is based on, like, anybody knows Leonard Michaels, the short story writer? He had an amazing piece. Go check it out. It's awesome. In the 50s. And it's so awesome. And also ripping on Joe Brainerd. So I'm not really reading, but
yeah.
Yes, thank you.
it was still very good. And it's still your life that you were conveying.
Or is it?
Yeah. Or this, the female Spencer, whoever that person is. Okay, so further to this might be maybe simpler to answer or even more difficult to answer. So further to this, and to not to discuss the how, but the why, Spencer, in your monologue, motivation, you talk about what motivates you to write, saying to the addressee and to make you know in some way deeper than words that your pain exists inside me too. This was a powerful moment for me. I read it a few times over. Speaking both to the frivolity of writing, but also because of its inability maybe to express the pain of others or to even accurately express one's own pain. So this question is for all of you, just using Spencer's words to kick that off. The question is, why do you write?
So I don't want to be jailed for killing someone. Well, yeah, no, really. I started writing when my first boyfriend dumped me when I was 21. I was totally heartbroken, borderline, you know, about to either kill myself or kill someone. And then I decided that if someone had to die, it had to be him. So my first book actually is called A Todos Os Voy a Matar, which means I'm going to kill them all. And it's a short story collection where I killed him in very different ways. So really it started as an attempt at, you know, to survive and not be violent in real life, and then just pour all of that into writing. And then it became an addiction and the need that, again, like a physical need that I need to sit down and write because otherwise I go crazy. So really, I do it as a self-preservation, thing to stay more or less sane.
And to keep the world safe.
And yeah. Sorry, I took this away from you.
No, I didn't want to go first. I think it's that's a good answer though, so it's hard to follow that up. No, I think it's it's funny. I never thought of. I used to sort of, when I was more of a journalist freelancer, I was a critic for a long time, and I wrote in a. I mean, I guess I still write for a living in a sense, but then I was really writing for a living in the sense that every article was my living, and so. I never thought of myself as someone who needed to write, like you're saying, Martha. And then I stopped doing that. I stopped freelancing, and I think maybe I did have some detox, but then eventually I sort of felt no, I missed it. And for me, writing fiction actually was also just about getting to make things up. Finally, I had grown kind of tired of having to stick to reality and not in essays and nonfiction and even in reviews. You have to stick to what the people actually said in their books and so there was this freeing moment of I get to make up this world, and that's actually part of the reason that I even started this fictional cities, that I didn't even want to have to stick to what a real city was like. I just wanted to be able to make up these spaces, and I think that translated to some extent into a lot of the themes in the book. There is a part of the book that's very much about self-actualization and the actualization of the community and how do you kind of build new and better worlds. And there's a couple of reviews of the book that actually sort of then said that the book is kind of about the power of words in that sense. And I never thought of it that way. And then when I sort of see what they mean, and that there is a piece of this that kind of maybe came from what even originally inspired it, which is just the joy of making things up and how that can actually be political in a way and it can be powerful in a way. So that's maybe part of why I write.
Yeah, those are both great answers, because I think in some ways I feel both of them. For you in a way it was sublimating and transforming really negative experience into something positive rather than negative. So it's like a pro-social transformation of energies that we have, which I feel a lot.
Is this being recorded?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it is. And then Thomas, having to write in real life for money sucks a lot. And you start thinking of all the freedom that could be had in writing that's so different from the day job. And I've always felt, I've tried to do this before, where it's you set up a writing routine, whenever it works for you, and you try to make it business, workable, whatever. You put in the time, because otherwise the writing doesn't get done. That can be really useful, but I think for me, that never really panned out as a working solution, because it felt like work. And it felt like writing is the only time, or one of the few times, I get to not work. And I get to be, like Dennis Rodman, bad as I want to be. We're in a bookstore, we can quote Dennis Rodman, which was his autobiography, Bad as I Want to Be. But truly, not constrained by faceless masters, panoptic watchers, or capitalist overlords, or fake imaginary mommies and daddies that exist in our lives. It's art. You can do what you want. So don't turn it into a job. Life is enough. It's cruel enough, So why I think at this phase of my midlife, writing is still a scream to be I got to do something to be free. Yeah. Also, there's I think too, an allure of just making something pretty to you. Why do we plant gardens or paint vases, or set up trellises or whatever? There's just something that we like to make, and we stand back and we say it is good because it's made and it looks nice to us. That's it. There's nothing more than that on that level. So, but it's a really, I think we all probably have decades of psychotherapy. Why, and the sedimentary layers of that.
just have to write a psychotherapist. And just have that conversation.
500 pages of a conversation with, I'm kidding. Therapy is a good thing. So writing the real, Tomas in City of Flames, it tracks a political movement sparked by, and speaking of how words can be powerful, a viral video of P just like standing up, thinking to himself, why am I here? I don't want to be here, but then flippantly standing up and speaking words that end up having more meaning to people than they probably should. And the reality of City in Flames is imminent, probably more imminent than we want to admit. And Martha, for you, you write about exploitation and injustice, and all the truths and the experiences of the women in the collection are very powerful in their honesty and in their reality. And Spencer, there are a lot of naked emotional truths in this collection. I wish I had the kind of brain to pinpoint every single one of them in response to your first question, but as artists, I want to talk to you about how you approach the real in fiction, the real people, the real moments, the real movements, and turn it into something more emotional than reality.
Can I ask you, what do you mean by the real?
So the idea that a lot of your poetic monologues are real. There is a Spencer Gordon, there is another Spencer, there is the 2000s that I assume are yours. But in approaching that in a more emotional way, as opposed to just, journalistic, approaching the political in an emotional way, as opposed to it being political journalism, and approaching a lot of the regimes, the South American regimes and everything happening are real, but again, there's a more.
Right, I think I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Thank you. Like I really admire people who can create really fantastic worlds, especially more of the kind of like conventional fiction, big fantasy novels or thrillers or horror, or like a lot of the generic titles, where there's absolutely magnificent worlds being spun. And I've slowly but surely like realized I can't really do that. And that's why I really admire people who can. So my kind of like bag is, like exploiting my real or whatever that is. So in other stories and fiction and in this book a little bit, and in poetry and stuff, I'd like to explore real people. Real celebrities as the protagonists or antagonists of the fiction, and just like grappled with like data from the internet or real life, and made it fiction. Because in my head, that was realism. My realism is like, I'm online and I'm seeing billboards and I'm, plugged into hearing about all this stuff nonstop. So for me to go and then write a novel that didn't have that absolute influx or glut of contemporary politics, celebrity, gossip or whatever, music, pop, was unreal. So yeah, it was just my fidelity trying to be like, well, how do I actually see? And I've always really enjoyed metafiction as well, where people have themselves placed into the stories or have bizarre, strange appearances by people we all know, like stepping through a doorway is, a politician, celebrity. It's just suddenly this like moment of dissonance and strangeness in fiction that I've always admired. So try to do it and rip it off. I think
so it's interesting because there's a lot in City in Flames that's real, and then it's but it's not. But like I said, Hillside is not a real city, and P is called P. We don't, it's sort of purposely kind of a site for both for the reader, but actually even for the people who live in the country. Like that, he comes to power in part by everyone being able to see what they want in him represents anything real. And I was always quite deliberate about wanting to keep a separation between what was in the book and sort of particulars in the world that are like it. So, there's certainly, P, is he Trump, or is he whatever, any of these other, leaders in the world. And P, one of the reasons it's P is like it's president, it's presidente, it's prime minister, it's premier, it's whatever, it's all these things. And Hillside is the city that's very Toronto-like, but it's also kind of in every city. And one of the reasons for that is that I sort of said this at the beginning, is about, I was trying to get at the emotional landscape that lies behind that politics, right? Like I started writing this before Trump got elected, and as I kept writing it, things kept happening, and the real kept intruding into the book, to the point that there's a part of the book that is like the fires are this sort of pivotal moment of where the city and the country kind of revolts against P, but in a way that's very self-destructive and ends up destroying the city and the country. And there was a moment when the January 6th riots happened in the States, and I was reading coverage of it, and they were talking about this moment where people are at the Capitol and they're yelling, "Let us in, let us in." And there was a literal moment that I had written in the book that had the exact same words, and I was like, it just like was, and I changed it because it was the real was way too intrusive onto this world. And what I was, trying to do is allow people to hopefully see the sort of connections, but I was intrigued by what is it that attracts us to this politics, but what is it that lies behind it in the sense of this like lack of control that we are experiencing that makes us want to assert control even more. So there's also like, climate is part of the book, but like even in the love story, it's this kind of these two people who are not feeling control of their lives, and this relationship is what allows this thing that can ground them, right? And I was like, so for me, I was trying to explore this kind of like say the emotional landscape of how do we assert control in positive and in negative ways? How do we assert control over each other, and how does that unfold? And so the real is important, I think, as as a backdrop for that, but what is as real is the stuff that often doesn't get talked about as much, which is how do we react emotionally to this stuff, and how do our emotional reactions actually like prefigure the politics that we get. So yeah.
Thank you. When I came to live in Canada, I had to find a job, and what I knew how to do before didn't really work, so I went back to school. And I did a master's and then a PhD in Spanish and Latin American literature. And so my specialization was, my doctoral specialization was political theater of the second half of the 20th century, which is a particularly violent time for Latin America because we have a collection of dictatorships, like whatever country you can think of, they had a dictator at the time or another, and they were doing awful things to people. And so as I was reading all of these stories and all of these documents, and talking to survivors and going in person, I went to Argentina, also the ESMA, the places where people were tortured. I just get goosebumps remembering setting foot in these horrible places. And then I came back to beautiful, peaceful Canada. And I was like, what am I going to do with all of these things that I have inside? It's, a doctoral dissertation is not nearly enough. I need to bring this out in a different way. So I started to weave elements from different stories and different, people and experiences and confessions and all of that, and bring them into my stories as a way to raise awareness to what this kind of government can do, and how lucky we are to live here, and how fragile that can be, because in Argentina and in Uruguay and in so many other countries, and Mexico even, you were living a fine normal life, and then all of a sudden, boom, you could be just like kidnapped in the middle of the street and taken into a dungeon, tortured out of your skin, and then dropped out of an airplane into the ocean. No one could do anything about it. So really for me, it was again like a way to give a voice to those thousands of people who suffer that, and particularly women, because so many women, we're always the trophy of war, where it's always our body that is used to inflict humiliation and pain on the perceived enemy. And when I talked to all of these women, and when I saw, the madres and the abuelas de la Plaza de Mayo, who are still, looking for their grandchildren, of these children who were appropriated by the dictatorship, and now I see the same thing in Mexico, women who go around with a shovel looking for the remains of their children and other women's children, and it makes me want to cry nonstop. I had to write about that. And so that's exactly what I did.
I just add one thing, because I really love the fragility and how, because that was also, I'm from Argentina, so there's a bit of knowing what things can descend to is I think was important even as I was writing it. But I think what you just said with fragility is so important, which is also just how quickly something like that can happen, and how normal life can become so abnormal and so destructive in kind of a split second. I really love that, so I think that's really important.
I'm going to move on to my question about catharsis, because I feel like this is a good time to talk about this. As a writer and reader, Martha, in the first piano, which is maybe my favorite story, you've got a brilliantly violent scene where a woman preempts her aunt's maybe imminent death by stuffing her into a piano and lighting it on fire. Spencer, in Late Capitalism, you offer a gloriously graphic depiction of the deaths of various fictional billionaires. Highly recommend reading that one if you want to just make good. And although the violence isn't graphic, as you say, it's this kind of underlying reactionary thing, the slow building tension in City of Flames, that it just made the ending feel like a hug. Like I just didn't know I was hanging on to all of this tension throughout. So I want to talk to you about that. Do you get the same sense of relief when you write something that you imagine or hope to imagine that a reader will get?
I was definitely relieved to finish writing my book again. No, it kind of over time became important to me that there was a sort of, I never thought it was catharsis, but I like that word. Yeah, that the end is not, that it's both honest in the sense that it's not that everything that came before it didn't happen, or can be resolved in an instant, or that all the sort of pain and that leads into sort of the more dystopian part of the book can be resolved very quickly. But I did want there to be a certain amount of hope at the end, and to me, part of the catharsis, there's something cathartic about. A lot of the book to me is about how do you connect the personal and the political, right? I tried to make this there's a sort of, it's kind of explicit in the sense that the part of the book is extremely personal. It's this relationship between two people that's extremely intimate because it's online, and they create this space that's only for them to, no one else has access to it. And it's a place where they kind of become the best versions of themselves, the versions of themselves that maybe they always wanted to be, but they couldn't be. And that is sort of related to the way that in a social capacity, sometimes the same kind of self-creation can be quite destructive, and it can be destructive in part because if you try to sort of politically, socially move in a way without having a sense of what you're trying to build, it can sort of only sometimes lead to only destruction without something afterward. And so I wanted to have the piece of it that is about how there is something about when we come together that can lead to sort of constructing something better. And I think that connects to the way that just in that relationship, when they come together as two people, they realize that they can kind of be better versions of themselves. And I feel like that can translate to something more social. And so there's a catharsis there, perhaps, in terms of just seeing destruction lead to rebirth in that sense. So yeah, for me, it was very important that, you know, if it was just about the destruction part of it, I think we all feel that. We feel that the world is coming apart, and we feel the kind of catastrophes around the corner all the time. But I think we also, if you know, hopefully in our better moments, can feel that there is an opening to kind of to rebuild and to rebuild relations, and feel that there's something there that's also positive.
Thank you. Well, for me, really, catharsis is not something I go looking for. When I am writing a short story, for example, all I have is a character and a conflict, and I never know where it's going to lead. It's always, you know, a blind kind of experience, and the character, you know, goes wherever it needs to go. And in that short story, that's, you know, that ending surprised me too. And that happens many times, you know, when I'm writing a short story, the ending is never something that had ever occurred to me before. I don't have a plan at all. But yes, once you have come to that ending, it is satisfying. It comes, you know, you feel some sense of relief that the character has accomplished their mission, and that they have done what they wanted to do, and to afford the character the freedom to have their own agency and choices, and not judge them, and not, you know, stop them because someone may think I am horrible, or maybe someone in my family is going to be angry. That particular short story actually caused me big trouble with my mom, who was a concert pianist, and she was not thrilled about it. And that's how I learned that when you need to write something, you write it, and then accidentally you may hurt people, and it's terrible. But I wouldn't stop writing because of that. So I am very, very aware of you know, facing the consequences of your choices. And there are certain choices I would not make because there are certain consequences I don't want to ever face. But when it comes to my writing, that's where I give myself freedom, you know, because everything else is so controlled in our lives. So even though we say we live in the free world, there are so many things we cannot do that in Mexico we can do anyway. For example, so it's the place where I allow myself to go deep into whatever dark rabbit hole inhabits my brain that I have never visited before, and then you know, things happen. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not so good. I apologize a lot, and I hope that people will forgive me. But I am not going to shut my own inner ways down, because that's all I have.
Yeah, I think it's pretty common. I think I have this too, where every piece has some kind of feeling or emotional truth in it that I just would like to excise, work through, kind of. And that, I think as writers, we often feel that once it's on the page, it's over. We can move on in some way. It's there. It's been preserved. I don't know. This book for me was pretty. It was a dark time when I was writing it. I was really isolated, wasn't living in the city. It's kind of a new house, new place. It's that real dense height of the pandemic. I didn't know anyone. And I hadn't published a book in years now going on, and I kind of stopped doing everything literary wise. I was just it was me and kind of nighttime, that Microsoft Word screen, and just going in the bin, what is this? So for me, it was finding the form. were the forms, and like feeling comfortable with those. And once the forms were found, the content started to appear. But for a long time, I was like, this is like, it wasn't writing towards publication. So it was highly cathartic because it could have just been the end. And I had no other like thoughts or feelings about another book. So the fact that it exists, I'm like highly grateful for, because it was certainly not. It's not like I don't have an agent. I wasn't writing toward anyone. I had jumped to publishers a couple times, and I was just like, "What is this?" So there wasn't a sure thing ever about it. I'm really happy. So that's a very good
Thanks very much.
Thank you so much. Unless anyone has questions, I'm gonna end it there with my one question to you all. You can talk about whatever you want for a minute, what you're working on, where people should go. Spencer, maybe you can mention the launch again for people online. I wish I could go, but it's our middle kid's birthday. But you want to share anything?
Sure. So actually, I have a short story in the front issue of the Walrus. So you gave me the moment. There you go. So go check that out if you want. Yeah, that's probably it. Everything else is very, very far away.
Well, I am currently working on my first novel. I'm at a final, revision process. It's set to, come out in May next year with Anansi again. So I'm very grateful to them, very grateful to Doc Richmond and everyone for trusting me again and being patient and welcoming. So I am very excited, terrified, super nervous, afraid, exhausted. This is the hardest thing I've ever done. I don't know why people do this. I can't wait to go back to short stories because this is excruciatingly horrible. But I hope that the book is going to be, interesting to someone when it's out there in May. So it's called A Daughter's. Oh my God. See, that's how tired I am. A Daughter's Place. And it's the story of the daughter of Miguel de Cervantes, the author of Don Quixote, whose only daughter was illegitimate. And their lives, Miguel de Cervantes' life is crazy, full of things, interesting things, unbelievable things. And his daughter has a very interesting life as well. And he was a man surrounded by women, so I decided to talk about these women. So in this novel, I think that today is the first time I'm talking about this in public because I've been terrified of sharing this attempt with the world because I don't know how it's going to be welcomed that a Mexican living in Canada writing in English is writing about this. I'm sure in Spain they will want to hang me. And so I'm writing about, the niece of Cervantes, his daughter, his wife, and his sisters, who all lived together with him and around him and supporting him and made his career possible, and how critics and academics don't give them their due recognition is mind-boggling to me. Most of the academics whose work I have read dismiss them or treat them like, like they were, can I say the WHORES word, or just capricious, evil, ungrateful, all sorts of things, or just not paying them any attention. And of course, this was a great, great man, our Shakespeare for Spanish speakers. But he was a great man, I'm sure, because he had all of these women around him, tending to him and helping him and giving him headaches too. So let's see how that does. So, A Daughter's Place, May next year. Please shelter me if you see an order from the Spanish government wanting to hang me from a post.
That sounds really good. Yeah. Yeah, I'll just plug it in. Yeah, the Anansi Bookshop is on Sterling Road, south of Lansdowne Station. It's Thursday at 7. Also, I want to make like this thing where my last book, I did a cross collab with the Red Dwarf Family Shelter, and this book is with Fred Victor. So they'll be there, and they'll be talking about their services, doing a raffle with some cool prizes from Henderson Brewery and Ethica Coffee Roasters, and a whole bundle of books from Anansi. Yeah, and all royalties for the book, should there be any, which is maybe not. But if there are any royalties, we'll go to Fred Victor as well. So please buy a few dozen each, or more, if you like. Yeah, and thanks again for having me.
Yeah, thank you. I'm gonna give you guys the microphone. One of you can do the raffle for the all year book.
Things I'm cheating.
Yeah, if it says Andres, then you have to do that.
No, it does not. Marianne Miller.
Thank you so much. I don't want to trick you. So please stay. There are copies of the books for sale. If you want to get them signed, please go and grab them. And Spencer, Martha, and Tomas will sign them for you. And thank you for coming. I'm not going to share details of next season, but you can go to junctionreads.ca. I'll have something up in a couple of weeks. That's probably really optimistic, but at some point in time. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you.